who is the biggest surprise in free agency? I'm going to go to Cameron Johnson to start.
Um, I would say one of mine that kind of flew under the radar, but is a big move in my opinion, is that the Eagles let Malcolm Jenkins
Mm.
walk.
I'm sure Jordan's going to have
Malcolm
a lot to say.
Malcolm Jenkins has been a staple on the Eagles defense that had one of the worst secondaries in the NFL last year. Letting Malcolm Jenkins walk is like removing the staple from a defense that was already poorly bound last year. I know they added Darius Slay. I know they bolstered the defense in some respect. Darius Slay is a great corner, obviously. But letting Malcolm Jenkins go, really the heart and soul of that defense, was honestly very surprising to me. And the Saints picked up a great safety, hard hitting, tough safety in Malcolm Jenkins. So the Eagles letting him go was surprising to me because he kind of seemed like a franchise guy to me. And he seemed very well respected, very well liked in the locker room. So them letting him go was very surprising to me. And it was honestly a great pickup for the Saints.
Jordan, I want to go to you about what your whole
Oh,
thoughts on this, obviously being a diehard Eagles fan.
so since his departure, I was originally I was upset and shocked because he was still under contract. He had a team option, but he wanted a pay raise, or at least that was the narrative. But the Eagles then declined their option. All of the city was very in shock and upset because it was like, how could you let him go? But now that I've looked back, I've actually been rewatching because NFL Game Pass is free. Got to shout that out. I've been rewatching the games, rewatching the coaches' film. And Malcolm Jenkins was a huge liability in pass coverage. It's a crime that he's labeled as a safety because he plays a majority of his snaps and makes most of his contributions as a linebacker. So I'm not upset that he's gone because I think Will Parks is going to torment the Giants and the Redskins and the Cowboys, all them. He's the new safety that's been signed. Jalen Mills switching, going back to his original position when he was in college. I think it's the right move. Obviously, it's one of those moves that's worse for the franchise than it is the team.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to Jimmy.
All right, so my biggest surprise, actually, first of all, I'd just like to. We were talking about the quarterback situation, and I forgot to chime in about this real quick about Cam Newton and Jameis. I think that just another huge problem that they're going to face is just the strength of this draft. You have Tua, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, and a lot of the teams that were looking for a quarterback, like the Bengals, the Chargers, they're most likely going to go to the draft. So
That's a great point.
that's another point that where they're going to run into problems. They would a lot of teams would rather invest in a younger quarterback rather than take a guy where like Cam Newton's had his problems, Jameis has the interception problem. I think they'd rather go young in the draft. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
for
I'm
my
gonna,
biggest surprise.
yeah.
Oh wait, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I want to get you in on this really quickly because we're not going to talk about this later. If the NFL season is pushed back, how big of a plus is that for somebody like Tua, who has had who's had injury problems, and wasn't sure if he was going to be able to start
Yeah.
the week one? Do you think that potentially puts him up? I know a lot of people are looking at him as a 3 pick after obviously Burrow and Chase Young. Is this now if let's say the season gets pushed back to November?
Mhm.
Is this maybe now we're looking at a Burrow 2 at 2 and Chase Young 3?
I mean, I don't know if the Redskins would take another quarterback after taking a quarterback so high last year. I mean, they could. Who knows? But I think that a later start to the season is a plus for any quarterback, or honestly, any player in the draft, just because they have more time in the organization, more time to study the playbook, get the chemistry down with your guys. I don't think that it would do anything but help the players. It would. I think it would hurt a lot of the fans because honestly, we want football, and I think it would hurt what's it called, some of the existing players that want to get right back into it. But I think for young quarterbacks, especially, and young players in general, I think that a pushback would only help them, and especially with Tua with his injury. He says he's 100%, but honestly, who knows at this point? He's the only one that really knows, and I think that giving him more time to recover would only help him. I don't know how, if you're the Redskins, you can pass up on Chase Young. I really don't. Honestly, one of the best edge rushing talents that we've seen in a long time, and that's including we had Clowney, we had Miles Garrett, we had a lot of guys, and from what I've been hearing, everybody's like, this guy is arguably a better prospect than even those guys. So I don't know if they're going to do that. I don't see him falling past 3. I think if the Lions are a bit are able to get him, I think they're going to take him. I don't think he's going to fall to the Giants as much as I would like him to. I don't think he's going to fall to the Giants, but yeah. So I think that a pushback, it's going to be interesting because with the draft, it's a big question mark. Yeah. Go ahead, Jordan.
I think one thing that's super telling is that the Redskins had actually traded for Kyle Allen, who he was playing with Riverboat Ron in Carolina. And a lot of that is because of they might have to go without OTAs, but the season might not get delayed. That's like the number one fear right now. So then Kyle Allen is going to be the week 1 starter while Dwayne Haskins starts to learn. So I think that there's going to be a little bit of a resurgence of these kind of adequate backups or inadequate backups like Kyle Allen. Maybe Jameis Winston or Cam Newton can find a home with a offensive coach that they've had in the past, because knowledge is what creates a leader, not talent.
Oh, definitely, yeah. Yeah, but I mean, even if they get signed, it's not going to be on a long-term basis. No team,
Absolutely.
I can't think of any teams right now that are like, I want to invest in Cam Newton or what's it called, or Jameis Winston. Anyway, my biggest surprise of this offseason is the Rams dropping Todd Gurley. Honestly, I had him on my fantasy team. I can't believe that they dropped him. I mean, sure, he's had his injury problems, but he still started 15 games last season, and 14 the year before. I mean, the guy's he has his injury problems, but he's usually a tank and he can fight through it. He's had 1,000 yards rushing in 3 out of his 5 seasons, and in those other 2 seasons, he had over 850 yards. He scores a lot of touchdowns because he can just pound the ball into the end zone. He can catch the ball. He's a what's it called? He's a 3-time Pro Bowler, 2-time first team All Pro. He was the 2017 Offensive Player of the Year. I just did not see them dropping a guy like that. Honestly, I thought that they would keep him and at least let him pan out for the rest of his contract, or try and trade him.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and I talk about this with one of my friends all the time, and he's very keen on this. He talks about the lifespan of running backs. Let's look, someone after 5-6 seasons, some running backs at the top of their game just aren't the same anymore. And a lot of times
That's
it's
true.
because of injuries. But let's look at some. How about muscle hamster Doug Martin? Where is he? He's probably only 30 years old. Haven't heard of him in 3 years. Devontae Freeman, he was a top 3 running back. Now he plays for a team that can't even get 5 wins in a year. Jordan Howard was leading the league in rushing. Jordan. Was he the 3rd string running back on the Eagles?
Second, but your point's valid.
Yeah. Okay. Just the lifespan of running backs is so small, and we see new running backs coming all the time. And I think as much as it's important to have a strong running back, we see just by a running back going into a strong offensive line, them being able to be successful. We saw it with DeMarco Murray on the Dallas Cowboys. He went to the Eagles, he did nothing. Yeah. So we see the lifespan of running backs. Sometimes their prime for running backs are 2-3 years, and then they're gone. I personally don't think Todd Gurley's going to do much anymore. And I just think he's past his prime. He's banged up too much. He's too many injuries. And
he got hurt in college. I mean, he was hurt his last season in college.
That's a great point. Yeah, that was one of the reasons he fell in the draft. There was injury problems. I just wanted to point that out there, that the lifespan of running backs are so small, and that's why a lot of as great of a talent as Saquon is, that's why some people disagree with it. What if Saquon's only good for 4 or 5 years?
Yep.
Let's go to.
Well, I'd rather have a good Saquon for 4 or 5 years than a mediocre Darnold.
Well, we'll see what happens.
I'm just kidding, Jesse.
No, you're not. Let's go to Jordan. That's your biggest surprise.
So I was originally going to go with the Houston Texans trade, but now that I'm thinking more and more about it, I think it's Nick Foles getting a job over Cam Newton and Jameis Winston. I can't. The Chicago Bears trading for Nick Foles' inflated contract truly just makes no sense to me. Cam Newton would have been about $10 or $15 million cheaper. Jameis Winston, they could have signed him for much cheaper. Like, Nick Foles is getting paid $20 million just to compete with Mitchell Trubisky. Chicago's a mess.
Yeah, totally.
They want to move on from Mitch Trubisky so bad.
Yeah.
That was the one thing I like. If I was the Bears, like, I wouldn't offer them. First of all, I wouldn't take Nick Foles' contract, even if they said Nick Foles for a 7th-round pick. Absolutely not. Why do you want that guy's contract?
It's bad.
I don't get it.
And then they go out and they sign Jimmy Graham, who's just like concussed always.
Speaking of another guy that was in his prime for 3 years and 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? Let's go to Cameron Smith. What do you got, buddy?
I think it's maybe not as a player, maybe not a specific move, but I kind of just want to talk about the Chargers for a minute because I think silently the Chargers have probably had one of the best off seasons of any team so far. As we know, the Chargers have a top 10 pick coming up. I think it's either 6 or 7. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I believe it's number 6.
Oh yeah,
Number 7. And a lot of people are saying
Seven,
that they
yeah.
could draft a QB. Some people are saying they might trade up Tua, Jordan Love. Irregardless of this, it's what they've done to prepare for this draft day. They've picked up Trey Turner. They've got Brian Beluga on the front end. They're bolstering up the offensive line. They got Linval Joseph after he left the Vikings to boost up the defensive line. And they also have Chris Harris, who's going to be a great veteran on the back end. We'll be able to work with guys like Derwin James, give them that veteran insight. They franchise tagged Hunter Henry, who was probably, I mean, I love Keenan Allen, but he was the most essential target for Phillip Rivers last year.
when he's healthy. When he's
healthy.
Yeah.
They also re-signed, well, not re-signed, but they did re-sign Austin Eckler, and they chose to move on from Melvin Gordon, which I think is for the best. It was the direction the team was moving in anyway. And I think all of those things lined up, you know, I think the Chargers probably had one of the best off seasons of any team so far.
Yeah, and with that, with that high draft pick, I hear a lot of talk about them taking Justin Herbert out of Oregon, and I'm an Oregon fan, so
Yeah, that'd be a great pick.
Yeah,
I mean,
Herbert. Honestly, you think about Herbert. You think about Herbert last year. If he went into the draft last year, he would have been one of the top quarterbacks there. He's kind of getting overshadowed by Tua and Joe Burrow, but you cannot forget about Justin Herbert, who has a great arm, cannon of an arm. He has all of the intangibles. I mean, I think if they can grab him with that young offense, with Keenan Allen, with Hunter Henry, with Austin Eckler, and with the shirt up defense, I mean, the sky's the limit for him, really.
Yeah.
Nah, it's Tyrod time.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. I'm gonna round this off. And what if I'm basically the way I'm phrasing? What if I told you that if you played good in 10 games in the NFL, you would make over $100 million over the next 4 years? That is exactly what Ryan Tannehill did. This guy was dead to beat. He was a backup for Marcus Mariota. Lucky that Marcus Mariota wasn't playing.
Blatant disrespect towards Ryan Tannehill is wild.
I'm sorry, but
He's awful.
Imagine getting paid $100 million
this guy
to hand the ball off to Derrick Henry.
Literally.
And then Derrick Henry gets the franchise tag. Sorry.
This guy, I'll give him credit. He had a very solid regular season, and 26 touchdowns and 6 interceptions is very good. I mean, this is a guy that is going to keep the ball for you, not turn it over, and someone you could trust. But 4 years, $118 million is absolutely ludicrous to me. We watched those playoff games. Look, if you're going to give a quarterback $30 million, you better be able to trust him when the moment's on. And what did he do? He gave the ball to Derrick Henry, and that's fine. Okay, that's it's the game plan. Derrick Henry's an absolute monster, but it's a great point. You franchise tag the person that brought you to the AFC Championship, and honestly, you probably should have been in the Super Bowl if they didn't choke. But you give a quarterback that played 10 games and handed the ball off to the best player the $30 million a year doesn't make sense to me.
And $91 million guaranteed.
What, $62 million you said?
Oh, $91 million guaranteed for someone who his whole career has been derailed by
Makes
one
me feel
ACL
much
injury.
better about Kirk Cousins.
I mean, I guess once they think they found their guy. I mean, I guess once you think you find your guy that fits your system, I mean, I guess you have to pay him, but
Jordan,
I don't understand it.
That's why Dak is worth $400 million.
Yeah. 62 million in fully guaranteed money, 91 million in total guarantees. I think it's a bad contract for them, and we'll see. But here's the thing, though: he's not a young guy anymore either. The guy's like 31 years old. He's not a young guy anymore. I don't like it.
And lost the job in Miami too.
Lost the job in Miami.